on my screen it says you're in the show. Everyone can see and hear you.
That's crazy. Whoop! And now it's telling me we're live.
I don't know, man. StreamYard's having
is not my friend today.
Oh.
Wow. Okay. Now I'm seeing if this actually did work. Did it work? Looking. Now it worked for me. It worked for you right away. My goodness. Okay.
Maybe we're in like alternate dimensions.
I know, right? This is crazy. Vulnerability. This is vulnerability. How Melissa's attitude changes when technology starts to frizzle out. I will be vulnerable enough to tell you that I become a bitch. It is not. I do not have patience for technology that wants to not do what it's supposed to do. Like,
nope. That's one thing for me. Like technology, and I haven't figured out where it is for why it's that bad for me, but it feels like it's a trauma response for me. The level of emotion, the level of and how
rage.
Quick I escalate. It doesn't feel like it's just frustration. It feels like there's, I don't know, something around control, or it could just be the whole things not doing what they're supposed to do the same way like the adults in my life didn't do what they were supposed to do when I was a kid. It could just be as simple as that. But yeah,
that's
it's really definitely funny. A massive like, this is not working.
I get that because I get rage. Like it's literally like a rage. And I'm like, why am I so angry? Because my computer is acting funky. But I get mad. Like I have to walk away. My husband will be like, what's the matter? I turn on the computer. And I can't even like get the words out because I'm so angry. So yeah, I wonder if it's a trauma response or if like a patience because they don't have patience.
Yeah.
We should dive into that someday.
We should. That would be a good one. That'd be a good conversation to have.
Right?
I have to get my brother-in-law to help me with computer stuff. I could figure it out from like a click and point follow along standpoint, but the frustration that I feel. So I'm like, can you please do this for me? And then I sit in the corner and seethe as he's working on it. And he's patient and he's like, oh, okay, this isn't working. I'll just try this. And I'm like, because it's not working well for him.
Would love to see us in the same office space. That would be hilarious.
Laptops go sailing out the window.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, happy Monday, everybody. It has definitely been a Monday morning for me. And I've always hated that, Mondays suck thing, but it seems like Mondays is when shit just tends to go a little off for me. I mean, but it equally happens on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays too, depending on what week it is. But this is one of those typical cat meme Mondays. Yeah.
So what are you going to do for some self-care and take a breather after this video?
You know what? That's a really good question because I have another call right after this video, but I will probably go off video because it's another and do some box breathing because I can feel that I need to
breathe.
And that's really all it's going to have to come down to because it's been since I got up this morning, when you have animals and toddlers and everything that needs something from you first thing in the morning before you get to have your needs met, then it's hard to take a minute to breathe. This is actually my first breathing moment. So I'm so appreciative for all of you that are with us or going to watch a replay because you gave me a reason to be here and relax.
Right. And have some breathing space. And that's really important. Like starting our, I'm not a big fan of the whole just have this fantastic morning routine in place because it's super toxic in a lot of cases. But there is something to be said for how we, start our day has a massive impact on the rest of our day. Like it sets the tone for our entire day. And so, I used to roll over and open my phone straight away and dive right into Facebook and emails and before I'd even gotten out of bed. But then I started my day way up here. And when I don't do that and I start my day and I get the dogs out for a pee and I get ready and then we go out for a nice dog walk and it's a totally different vibe to how my day starts. So
way different experience. Mine's a little different. I wake up and pop open my eyes to see a toddler this close to my face, popping open her eyes, laughing, right? Eat. And she signs and talks. So she'll say, eat, juice, eat. Yep, let's go. Can't even pee alone. But that's definitely way better than opening my phone, So it's still, unless she is a crab apple like she was this morning. Like she was a complete toddler-saurus. She couldn't open, she has a learning app and there's an update and she couldn't get to it. And they don't understand it's broken. They don't understand there's an update. They don't understand any of that.
We were just talking about how we can't even handle technology not working the way that it's supposed to, and we understand all that shit.
And then she couldn't wear her favorite dress. She has a dress, she calls it her birthday cake dress because it was her dress for her 3rd birthday, and it's like super, it's got gold filigree, so she uses it as dress up. Well, she got milk on it yesterday, so I'm not gonna have this sour smelling child running around the house. But that was a whole other like breakdown. And then it was fly dress. I'm like, okay, good, we're gonna wear the butterfly dress. Okay, that dress is clean, we can do this. Go see your dad.
Have kids, they said. It'll be fun, they said.
Right. It's rewarding, they said. Good morning, Mia. Oops. Mia Voss is on.
Oh, Mia, hello. Hello. I'm just opening up my phone so that I can see any comments that come on here because they don't show up for me here for whatever reason.
But, that's crazy.
But yeah, so vulnerability.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Vulnerability. It's funny because vulnerability for me used to mean weakness, right? Showing all my emotions and showing who I am and being soft used to be weakness in my mind. Like in my 20s and in my 30s, there was no, I'm not going to tell you how you made me feel. Like, I'm not giving you that power to know what you did to me. And I would keep it all to myself. And now it's quite the opposite. I'll feel something and I'll say, and to be vulnerable and open. My husband and I just actually had an argument about this weekend, not about vulnerability, but we're very different. So when we have a disagreement and something hits me a certain way, I'll cry. Whereas he's not that person at all. Right. But if I feel safe and I'm in a safe space, I'm a crier. I'm going to cry. And it means that I feel okay, that I can show you all of who I am. Yeah. I would cry on a live if something was brought up. If we talked about stuff that we've talked about personally, I would, the nose red and I would start crying because in this space, I can't see everyone that's involved on the other side. So I feel safe. Yep. But that doesn't mean that in the middle of a grocery store or around people who I think might use it for their own gain later. Did you know, Melissa, that? So there's a line, but it's amazing how your relationships change when you show up to them open.
Yeah, and it's important because so like my journey with it was same thing. Like nobody knew how I felt. I never showed how I felt unless, because what happened was I would stuff my feelings and then I would just explode and vomit it everywhere, right? So it was like this cycle of like ice queen, nobody knew anything, and then not being able to regulate my emotions and vomiting all over other people. And then when I started learning about vulnerability, and I went so far to the other side of the pendulum that I would just like share everything with everyone all the time. And I think I've said this before, like I would meet people and be like, hey, I'm Erin. Nice to meet you. Here's my trauma. Blah. And people would just be like, what the fuck? And then I would like get hurt. I would hurt my own feelings because I didn't have any boundaries around it. And, Brene Brown says that, she's the best where she says, vulnerability includes boundaries. Without boundaries, it's not vulnerability. And vulnerability is for people who have earned the right to hear your story, right? It's not just go out there and I see this a lot in our social media culture where people are sharing really personal stuff on TikTok videos or on Facebook and there's no judgment. Like that's if that's what they're doing, great. But that's their journey. But what I have learned is that I used to do that looking for connection, right? because that's what vulnerability is all about. It's about connection with people. And like you said, your relationships change when you show up with vulnerability, because you're allowing actual real connection to be there. But connection can't happen if we don't have the boundaries in place and we're just vomiting our stuff everywhere.
Right. No, absolutely. That's actually, the way you word that is so perfect. And people do have to earn the right to be opened up. I remember years ago, I was working with a woman who was in the self-defense arena, and she worked with previously sex trafficked victims. And one of the talks that I had, I think it was a Facebook Live I had, and this was like 6 years ago, about vulnerability and how being soft is not a detriment to your character. Being soft actually makes you strong. Being vulnerable makes you strong, because you're saying, I'm strong enough to share this with you regardless of what the outcome is going to be, because and I'm trusting you that it's not going to be a negative outcome, but I'm also trusting me that I'm open to what I get for feedback. And she was extremely irate with me because she felt I was telling women to put themselves in dangerous situations.
Right.
And because you hear the word vulnerable, and we use it all the time, well, I was just vulnerable, or I was too vulnerable, but that's just it. It's that too vulnerable piece but you have to engage your brain. There's this, when it comes to trust and making decisions, there's like a 3-step process, right? And my first step is to listen to my heart. What does my heart tell me I should do? Because my heart is like my emotional being. Right. And then I listen to my head, because my head is my logical being. Should I share this? Should I keep this to myself? And then there's the gut, that like third piece that will always tell you, if you listen, if you're in a safe situation.
Here's the thing on that, though. For a lot of people with trauma, it can take a lot of healing and a lot of work to get to a point where you can connect with any of those, where you can connect with your gut, like your gut in particular, because with certain types of trauma, we end up, fear and our gut can feel identical. And it can be really hard to disentangle the two, and really hard to tell, is this really my gut or is this just fear? Fear and pleasure can be really hard, funnily enough. Fly in the room. Funnily enough, can be hard to disentangle as well. So, I 100%, we need to find ways to listen to, can we listen to our heart? Can we listen to our head? Can we listen to our gut? It's also really important to recognize that we need help getting to be able to recognize those things, right? We need help to be able to recognize that, because trauma, which happens to every single fucking woman that I've ever met. But B, we live in a society that conditions us against being in touch with our feelings, that conditions us against that. So a lot of people don't know how to be in their body, don't know how to, is this my head? Is this my heart? They can't differentiate between thoughts and feelings, right? And also, they think that their feelings are facts. They think that their feelings are truth, and they're not. Our feelings are always valid. How you feel is always valid, but that doesn't make it true, right? So just because, this is a big one that I work with my clients a lot on, is like the difference between unsafe and uncomfortable.
That's a difficult one to, because the feeling is very similar.
Yep.
It's very similar. And that's where you have to really break it down to figure out, is it uncomfortable or unsafe? And some people, when they're uncomfortable, they do feel unsafe because they haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm curious. It took me a long time. And I think ultimately what happened is I ripped the Band-Aid off in 2016. When I had my breakdown, I realized that if I didn't change my icy ways, that it wasn't going to be good for me anymore. And I ripped the Band-Aid off. And then at that point, I just said, okay, if you're in my circle, I'm going to let you know who I am and the real me. But I was still not good with uncomfortable. Uncomfortable felt unsafe.
Yeah.
And that wasn't until recently that I got to a point where now I can tell the difference. But, I didn't have the benefit of working with you. And I'm curious, what is one of the first steps that you tell somebody when they don't know the difference? Because I think in business, that can keep people from being able to progress, because everything you want it's so cliche, but it is on the other side of something you have to do that makes you uncomfortable or that's a little scary. So what can somebody do that's not at that place yet, where they know it's their gut, where they know if it's discomfort or feeling unsafe? What's a check? Is there like a process that they can go through?
Yeah, there's lots of different processes. There's not an easy, like, hey, do this one thing and then you'll be it. Like, it's a process because you have to learn, right? So one of the first things that I say this for fucking everything, but if you're struggling with the difference between unsafe and uncomfortable, go to therapy. Like that, that's one of the most important things. But also so the process that I use with clients is twofold. One, starting to get comfortable feeling whatever you're feeling, right? Because we live in a society that tells us to avoid our feelings. We live in a society that's like, if you feel bad, eat something. If you feel bad, over exercise. If you feel bad, binge watch Netflix. If you feel bad, have a drink. If you feel bad, just avoid those bad feelings at all costs. And then we do ourselves a disservice because then we don't know how to sit with our emotions. And all of our emotions, like we were talking about in one of my posts, was all of our emotions are benevolent. They are all trying to help us. They are all working for us. And yet most of us have been conditioned that there are enemies, that they're bad, that they're negative, that we shouldn't feel them. And so we don't know how to sit with them. And so we don't know what they feel like, right? A lot of people can't even recognize, are you sad? Are you angry? Are you scared? Are you tired? What? They're like, I don't fucking know. It just feels bad. Right. So a lot of the work we do is, how do you sit with your feelings and start to recognize what they are? And I have to do some more research into this, but I saw something the other day that fascinated me, which was that basically for physically to process an emotion for us only takes 90 seconds. If we go into it to process the emotion, it takes a lot fucking longer when we try to avoid it. Right. So getting people used to, can you sit there for 90 seconds with this feeling and then start identifying what that is? Because once you recognize that it's just a feeling, it's not going to kill you. It's not as bad as you think it's going to be. Yeah, it might fucking suck, but it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. Can you get used to sitting with your feelings? Then you can start differentiating what your feelings are. And then you can start telling, is this fear? Am I uncomfortable? Am I unsafe? But you have to know what those feelings are. Right. So that's a lot of the work that we do, is how do you like sit in your feelings and just feel what you feel. And then another one that I use is truth telling, which is like writing things, waiting until you're not in that, like, I don't want to use the word triggered because it's not always triggered, but let's just use it for lack of a better word. When you're not in that like heightened emotional state, for example, right? Take a breather, get into your body, get out of your head, because that's a big one too. Like we get stuck in our head so much. And getting into our body is one of the most helpful things, which for people with trauma can be really hard because our bodies were often where it was unsafe to be, right? And we retreated into our head because it was safe. But things that I use personally for myself is holding onto something cold. So if I'm in that headspace and I know what it feels like to be triggered like that, and I know like I get tunnel vision, my heart rate increases, I get really sweaty, my breathing gets really shallow. I can't make good fucking decisions there. So when I'm feeling that way, and I don't always remember it, but when I do, I'll go to the freezer and I'll grab an ice pack and just hold something, because that physical sensation brings my prefrontal cortex back online. Standing on one foot is one of my go-tos, just because then I have to focus on balancing. Because if I'm not focusing on balancing, I'm stuck in my head, I'm going to fall over. So the things like that, can you, like, what are 5 things in the room that you can name that you can see out loud? Just things that will get you in the body, in the present, rather than stuck in your head. And then truth telling, when you're back in your body, when you're out of that, like, what the fuck stage, write it down. Like, write down, what are you feeling? Okay. So again, we're identifying what you're feeling. And then what are you telling yourself that feeling means? What's the story you're telling yourself? Because feelings aren't facts, right? So what's the story you're telling yourself? And then what truths do you know? Like, what do you absolutely know to be true? So for example, for me, if I'm going through something like that, like, what am I feeling? I'll list the feelings. What am I making it mean? What's the story I'm telling myself? This is what I'm making it mean. And then the truths very often will be, in this moment, I am safe. I'm in my house. I've got my dogs. There's nobody else in the house with me. I got family right across the street. I got any number of people I can call on the phone. I am safe in this moment. That's a truth. And then get into like, what are some truths about this situation and about the story that I'm telling myself. And that is really helpful because, again, feelings are not facts. And when we get used to challenging them and seeing where they come from and what they are and what's actually true, it can help shift our perspectives around it.
That's actually really, really, really infinitely really powerful, because if you take yourself into your body and you start picking apart that story, and you can see where you have, and I've done this, where, you know, you hear something, see something, and now in your head, you're making it move forward and progressing the story without proof.
Yep.
Reacting to that.
Yep.
And if you take yourself back out and you start actually naming the truths, you'll realize how little, but remembering too, that feelings aren't going to kill you. No matter what it feels like, it's not going to kill you.
Yep.
And then the next time you feel that, or the next time you go down that path, you recognize it. You know, you and I talked about this before, and it probably feeds into the neural pathway, you know, retraining of neural pathways.
Yep.
And we talked about my trauma response of when I get into an argument, you know, with my husband. And I have trouble sometimes with vulnerability because of the fact we're so different, but I am still always vulnerable because that's my husband. Like, and he needs to know this side of me, regardless of whether he's comfortable with it or I'm comfortable with it. But one of the things I would always say is, money gives choices, work harder, because I could go. I'm not going anywhere. Yeah. But it was when we broke through that, but I could. Like, I feel safe in I could.
Yep.
But when we broke through that, now, if I have that thought, I'm like, trauma response, breathe. It's okay. This is an intense feeling. I'm going to move past it and through it. I just have to let it go. I have to get over to the other side, and I'm not going to feel this anymore. And it has changed exponentially. Now,
because you're rewiring your brain, like you were talking about. We can literally create new neural pathways with how we choose to respond in certain situations, with the thoughts that we do, and if we just continue, and that's why I say it's really important to get out of your head, because if you're stuck in your head, you're just on that fucking super highway of the neural pathways that already exist, that are super strong, that are super easy to go down, and thinking about it differently isn't going to just, stop it and create those new pathways. You have to get out of that cycle in your head first to be able to change that.
Yeah. And the more that you do that, the more you will be able to trust your gut more, because you'll be more aligned with.
Yeah. You'll be able to tell. You'll be able to identify fear, gut.
Yeah.
Heart, head. Because those people all the time, when people start working with me, it's this weird, what do you mean my thoughts and my feelings are different? What do you mean my thoughts control my feelings? What do you mean? I feel a certain way and then I behave accordingly. That's what we do. No, we don't have to. Now, I'm not talking about trauma responses where, we have our Jesus, fuck, the word has just fallen right out of my head. Our systems, our nervous systems, thank you. I'm like, neurosystem. No, that's not right. Our nervous system has a response, right? Like a PTSD response of, this is dangerous. This is, we physiologically have the response. Our breathing increases, we get tunnel vision, all those stuff I was talking about. And so this is where we have to go back to talking about toxic positivity. If we just say, oh, well, in that moment, you can just choose to behave differently. That's not always true. Right? That's not always true in the moment when you're having that response. What is true, however, is you can learn. It's not fucking easy. It takes a lot of vulnerability, but you can learn how to bring yourself back online. You can learn how to respond in those, or breathe and get through that response, or hold something cold, or whatever it is to get your prefrontal cortex back online. And then you can learn how to get that quicker and faster so that next time it's a little bit easier. So I totally forgot the point.
Well, this is also this actually ties into anxiety, anxiety, panic attacks, where you have those moments of, because you do physically lose control in those moments. And I do still have them. I don't have them as often, but now I feel them coming and I can head it off. But it took a long time to realize, what do I need to hear? What do I need to tell myself? What do I need to feel? So that this doesn't go into a full-blown, oh my gosh, I think I'm having a heart attack. Nope, it's just acute anxiety. But to get to that point of retraining your brain and understanding, and also giving yourself permission to feel those things and act that certain way, because what happens, especially if you're around anyone, like if you have older children or you're married or you have a roommate or whatever the situation is, when these things happen to you on the outside, not everyone is comfortable being around that because they don't know how to act.
Right.
And they don't know what to say. And a lot of times they'll say the opposite. It's not bad. Just relax.
Just calm down.
Right, because they don't understand that you actually are not in control in that moment, and you have to take it back. Like the paper bag breathing. You're literally, I think it's less about breathing in a bag and more about the fact that you are paying attention
to
the breathing that you're doing, and it brings you back. And it's all tied in together, and being vulnerable with the wrong people can make you feel that way. So I feel like we should tell you, it's funny because every time we have a conversation, it leads to a deeper piece of what all of this stems from. And we should probably have a conversation about like anxiety, depression. And what that looks like every day on a day-to-day basis. And it's funny because I am in the process now as an adult, which is very strange. Went to my doctor and I'm being tested for ADHD because the depression, anxiety, what I've noticed my whole life, my mother's always said, you love chaos. But I don't love chaos. But even when life is very smooth, I find I will still have a panic attack. I will still feel that depression. And that's because the brain doesn't ever shut off when you have ADHD. You're always got so much. So I was like, there's a piece of me that says, well, this makes a lot of sense. Please, let's figure this out. But in those moments, you don't have control, and you have to take it back, but you have to recognize what it is and be okay with the fact that this is what it is and not be ashamed.
And, yes, I agree with everything you've just said. And also, like, this is something I'm going to do a post about it this week too, and it's going to piss a lot of people off. Because while we don't want to be shaming ourselves and we don't want to be like not accepting of where we're at, we also have to really be mindful of the fact that we are 1000% responsible for our emotional responses and our behaviors. It doesn't matter what's going on. And I don't mean that to sound harsh or like, I don't give a shit what's going on. Like, whether it's a trauma response or an anxiety attack or depression or whatever it is, ultimately, we are the only ones who are responsible for our behavior in that moment, right? And so if it's anxiety and panic attacks or a trauma response where our nervous system is taking over and we don't actively have control, it's our responsibility to learn how to heal that. Right? Rather than just, oh, well, this is just going to be the way I behave for the rest of my life. So yes, it's that balance of, we don't want to be shaming ourselves for it because we are where we're at. But what really got me thinking about this was a friend of mine who's a Black woman who said, Black people don't have that option. Black people don't have the option to like feel what they feel and act on it in public because it literally becomes life-threatening. And I was like, true. So like, So let's look at that. All of these like Black, brown, and Indigenous and people of color around the world who have had to learn how to regulate their emotions because it's life-threatening without access to mental health stuff or therapy in a lot of cases, or they've just had to fucking figure it out. And so, I agree. Like we need to have compassion for ourselves, and we need to be not shaming and be able to be with ourselves in that moment, but also not use it as an excuse.
Well, and you're just not allowed to, because you're going through that doesn't give permission for somebody else to have to feel the effects of that. That's
the big thing. Yeah, that's the big thing. Because like our thoughts and our feelings and our behavior don't have to be the same thing. It takes a lot of fucking work to get there. But it doesn't have to be the same thing. And I think that's where we really have to be. And again, it takes vulnerability to recognize that, to recognize that I am responsible for my, and I struggled with this for like 15 fucking years, man. It was easier to expect other people to accept me because I was a victim. It was easier to expect sympathy and empathy from other people than it was for me to do the hard work of healing. Right. Mm-hmm. So I walked around vomiting my toxic shit all over anybody who came across my path because that was the easier thing to do. And it took such vulnerability to get to the place of recognizing, you know what? It wasn't my fault that trauma happened, but it's my responsibility what I do with these feelings. My behavior is my responsibility, regardless of what's happened or what's happening. And that's a big, that took so much vulnerability because it took recognizing where I needed work, recognizing where I wasn't perfect, recognizing where, and that's a blow to the fucking ego, man, to look at like, okay, these are ways that I'm behaving that I don't like. And shaming is not vulnerability, right? When we shame ourselves for it or we beat the shit out of ourselves for it, that's not vulnerability. True vulnerability is, fuck, okay, so this is not the way I want to behave. I have to dig into this. I understand where it comes from. It's reasonable that I feel the way that I feel. It's okay that all of these feelings are here, and I have to fucking figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 100%. Because otherwise all you do is create problems for somebody else down the road, especially if they are in your house or they're little people, pets. They all pick up on that stuff. So you could be doing damage and not meaning to. Absolutely not meaning to.
No,
but
absolutely
doing
not.
Damage. And and the work it's big work. It is big work. And taking responsibility, I still think of when my husband died in 2012, something, intrinsic just changed, and it wasn't for the better. I realized this year how much trauma response I still had left from that. In that I didn't let people in, even though I felt like I was. Like I didn't even realize what I was doing. But I was not vulnerable at all because I was shown that the universe is going to take whatever it wants whenever it wants. So I was afraid to truly love. I was afraid to, there were so many things I was afraid to do because I could lose it again. So I was afraid to be vulnerable about anything. I wasn't going to be open about, but now it's different, but I also know it's uncomfortable.
Of course.
I know it.
Yeah, vulnerability is uncomfortable.
With it. Like loving my husband, the way, I was lucky enough to have this chance now. Loving him the way that I do is uncomfortable still because I'm not fully past that. How do I say this? I'm not fully okay with the fact that it could happen again.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? I'm not excluded from tragedy again. Of course. And I'm still not sitting with that 100%, but I'm acknowledging it and I know it and I'm not allowing it to affect my behavior.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Because like we have two options when things get shitty in life. We have two options when awful shit happens. We can either retreat and hide and be like, I'm never even trying again. I'm never connecting with another human again. I'm not having another relationship. I'm not trying another business coach. I'm not trying again because it fucking hurts. Or that fucking sucked. Okay, how do I heal from that? And how do I go out in the world and love and be and exist knowing full well that it's going to fucking hurt, knowing full well that there is the potential for tragedy, that there is the potential for massive fucking heartache. And you don't have to choose to be vulnerable, but having done both, hiding and not trying is so much worse.
It's lonely. It's so lonely, and you lack the depth of friendships where you don't get, like, I feel comfortable in the women that I have been vulnerable with. Like, I feel comfortable that if I were to have to ring you at some inexplicable hour because I'm like, oh, in this moment, I really need Erin. I need her. I'm not afraid to let you know that I am in desperate need of you. And there's not a lot of people I feel that way with because I spent 9 years blocking those connections. Now I find myself, I'm like, this feels awesome. So I have to make sure I don't make too many connections, all right? Because I don't have the time because now I'm like, I love this is wonderful. I want all the people. But I it's not fair because I don't have time to give all the people. But but it feels good. It feels good to just be like, this is who I am, and I'm safe with you.
Yep. And that's the biggest thing, that when I learned it, it pissed me the fuck off. And when my clients learn it, they're like, are you fucking kidding me? Which is, in order to heal from trauma, we need connection with other human beings.
I'm laughing.
Cannot do it without.
Mia just posted something. She's funny. I don't know her.
Love Mia. I love her. She's one of my favorite people.
She was in her feelings this weekend, and she had one of those, I'm taking my toys out of the pool and not playing anymore. She said she got past it, but it was very real.
Yeah, it is real. It happens all the time. I'm taking my ball and going home. Fuck you then.
Right. Yeah.
It's totally real. Yep.
That's hilarious.
Yep. But if we really want to live, and anybody who's like new to vulnerability, who's watching this, who doesn't know who Brene Brown is, fucking go watch her stuff. Just Google Brene Brown vulnerability. Like, she has a TED Talk, and then that'll take you down the rabbit hole of all of her stuff. She's fucking phenomenal. And like, she says that if we want to live wholehearted lives, if we want to live like full lives, it's impossible to do without vulnerability. And let me just say, if you're sitting here like, oh, that's bullshit, she's a fucking scientist. Like, she studied shame and vulnerability her entire fucking career. She's a researcher. That's what she does. So the science says that if we want to live wholehearted lives, we have to be connecting and we have to be vulnerable.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, we again went over time.
Again. I know.
Whatever. We do what we want. But so next week maybe we will talk about. I think anxiety depression would be a great topic. Just because it plagues so many people, and it's funny because it just came up with a potential procedure I might have to have, and looking at the health situation of everything. And knowing that come fall, we may have more restrictions again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with that comes another spike in mental health, or a downward spike, right? A downward spike in mental health. And not everybody has the access to health insurance or the access to talk to someone. And I think that if we start having those conversations now, it can help those that really do feel that.
Cool.
Have some
anxiety next
the word I'm looking for. Techniques, some thought processes, and just know that you're not alone, because that is a big deal too. Just knowing that there's a bunch of other people that are like out there too.
Well, I think that's really relevant. Like, with the whole, I don't believe, like, I'm looking at this reopening being like, talk to me in a month when we're back on fucking lockdown because of this reopening.
Yeah.
But with the reopening, there's a certain amount of anxiety that comes with that. There's so much anxiety that's come with living in a global pandemic for the last 18 months. There's I had mild social anxiety before the pandemic. So now I'm just like, all of my social skills have like fucking atrophied. What the hell? So I think it's a super relevant topic for a lot of people right now.
Now's the time. Now's the time to talk about it before they start putting new laws. And I actually was with my best friend 2 weeks ago, and we had gone to the store, and I am the person that double masks. So, because I feel safe that way, and that's what I do. And I feel like it's the right thing to do for people around me.
Yeah. So
I'm telling her, I'm a social person. I'm touchy-feely. You probably get this from me. Like, if we live near each other, I'd be like, Erin! Like, I'm huggy. I'm smoochy. I'm the person that, when you're close to me, I'm putting little hearts and stars on your shit, because it's who I am on the inside. Now, I don't fucking care to see anybody. I don't care. I love you from here.
I love you from the other side of a screen.
and I'm okay with that. I have found that my relationships, my connections are just as strong this way, as long as I'm being vulnerable, right? If I'm being open and the other person's being open, I don't have to touch you. Looking at your face, feeling, sharing, this is fine for me. And I have found, because of the pandemic, I don't care as much about having another live summit again. I don't care about, not right now. It's not important to me. The connections are important, but having to be in front of people is no longer important to me. And I think there's a piece of me that's glad for that, because now I know I can connect with people all over the world. I can connect more regularly, because I wouldn't be able to see you all the time.
No.
Hell, I wouldn't have even met you if it weren't for the pandemic.
Yeah.
So
totally.
Yeah. Yay. All right. So
Cool.
next week, anxiety and
Next week,
depression.
anxiety.
Bring it
Let's
on,
do it.
peeps. Let's go. All right. Have a great rest of your Monday. We can't wait to
you
see you next
too.
week.
Bye.
Bye.